Hi, I'm Chandan Lahiri from OTASS Survival School, and I thought I would just take you through some of the stuff that one carries. A lot of people would call it a survival kit. Some people would call it a bug-out bag. It's all of that. It's both of that. It is a survival kit for use when you get into a survival situation, when you're out in the woods, in the wilderness, you've got lost or injured, can't find your way back to camp. What are the things that should be with you? But those are extreme cases. But very often what I would consider these items is how to become a more confident camper, So if the stuff with you helps you become a better camper, you can do with much less stuff. And I've seen people who carry 20-kilo backpacks with a lot of stuff that they wouldn't use, primarily clothes. And so I'll just take you through some of the stuff. And if you remember the 8 essentials of survival, of self-reliance, the first is attitude, and you can't pack for that. It's already packed up in your brain. One is attitude. The first thing that you need to do once you find yourself in a self-reliant situation, a survival situation, what you need to do is find shelter. And if you remember the rule of threes, without shelter, exposed to the elements, could be rain, could be snow, cold, heat, dehydration, the sun, you could fall sick pretty quickly. In fact, it could lead to fatalities. And the rule of three states, without shelter, you could be dead in 3 hours. So the first is shelter. Once you have made shelter, the next thing that you need to do is make a fire. And fire has loads of benefits. You cook your food, you boil your water, it keeps you warm, it gives you illumination, light. So you need to light a fire. Then you need to find water, drinking water. There's a lot of water out there, but not all of it is drinkable. Treat all water as contaminated. So you need to find water to make it drinkable. Again, the fire comes in handy. Then is food. Food is the least important among these 4 things: shelter, fire, water, food. Because your body has enough reserves. If you're in a survival situation, you can go without food for a few days, in fact for 3 weeks actually. So once you've taken care of yourself by making shelter, by lighting a fire, by finding drinking water, finding food to eat, to keep yourself energized, you need to find your way out of that problem or situation or environment or circumstance that you find yourself in, which is where signaling comes in. You might see people in the distance, so you'll need to be able to signal. And then you got navigation. If you don't see anybody, you need to self-navigate your way out of that area. And then lastly, it's first aid. First aid is essentially getting out of that area as fast as possible. Just stabilize whatever little injury you have. Because anything in the wilderness can become nasty pretty quickly. So those are the 8 things which are essential for wilderness survival. And along with that, to make sure that you can manage those 8 things, 7 without attitude, you'll need some tools. So that's essentially what you need to carry to be able to address each of these essentials of survival. So I'll just take you through that. And the smaller the bag, the better it is, because a gram becomes a kilo becomes a ton on your back. When you're fatigued, when you're tired, when you're walking up and down and you're lost. So best is to keep your bag as small as possible. Now all this thing that you see here, pretty much from here to here, would come in a bag like this. This is not too large, it's small. And what I could do is just hang it around my neck, and that's the size it is. So a bag this size is kind of ideal. The problem would be that the moment you start increasing the size of your bag, you tend to put more and more items. So you've got another bag here, which will take a little more stuff. And this is a backpack, so it'll go on your back. But still, even this is a small size. And all of this stuff comes in this bag with room to spare. So keep the bag small, don't make it large, don't make it a 30-kilo pack. Try and keep it to around 5 or 6 kilos. It should not be more than that, if that. I mean, if you can make it about 2.5, 3 kilos, that's ideal. So let me just take you through some of the stuff. I'll start with shelter, because that's the first thing you need. Now in shelter, you can make debris shelter, you can make lean-to shelters, you can find stuff in the outdoors, in the wilderness, with which you can make a shelter, but that takes time. If you're making a lean-to, you know, to gather branches, logs, leaves, dry grass, to make it insulated, make a mattress, stuff like that. So if it's small, it makes life so much easier. The shelter that I've got, this is my shelter system. This I can rig it up in about less than 2 minutes actually. This is my tent. It's a one-man tent. It's a small tent. It's light. It's less than a kilo actually. This is light. So this is my tent, and this is my top sheet. I can do without a tent, to be honest. This is a 10 foot by 10 foot top, and with a 10 foot by 10 foot top, I can rig up a tent with this, with a ground sheet if necessary. So at a pinch, I would only carry this, which is the top sheet, but I do have a tent, and since it goes into both these bags pretty easily, I would tend to carry both. But if volume becomes an issue, weight becomes an issue, and if I'm going only for 2, 3, 4 days, then maybe I'll drop the tent. I'll just carry the top. Also depending on the weather. If it's cold, I would tend to carry a tent. Also, if it's cold, what I would also carry is this thermal blanket. This opens up into a 7 foot by, I think, 3 feet, 3.5 feet. And it's got a reflective surface. If I can quickly, it's got a reflective mylar surface on one side, and it's got this orange nylon on the other side. So at a pinch, you can use this as a signaling device just in case you get lost. And when you're lying down, that's the one which reflects your body heat back. So you're far more comfortable. And again, it hardly weighs anything. You can dump it in your pack, and you're a lot more comfortable. So that's the other thing which is part of my shelter system. So I got a tent, which is a one-man tent, small tent. It doesn't even require any poles. I can find a couple of trees, or I can cut a couple of branches, and the tent is up in a jiffy. It takes about, like I said, less than 2 minutes to put it up. And if it's cold, I've got this in which to either lie down and wrap myself on it, or just put it on top. If I've been able to manage a mattress with dry grass, needles, pine needles, stuff like that. The other thing which I have, which I consider part of my shelter system, is a poncho. Now this, if it's raining, I can wear it. And if I didn't have any of this, I could open this up and turn it into, use it as a top sheet and make a shelter out of it. It is waterproof, so I'll be protected from the rain or the snow or whatever. So the poncho is another thing which is part of my shelter system. It's also said that clothes are your first defense. It's your first shelter. So of course the clothes on your back that you're wearing, that's your first shelter system. What I also have is a bandana, which I can wrap around my head if it's warm. It'll protect me. If it's cold, it'll protect me. What I also have is a shamag, which I can use multi-purpose. I can use it for purifying water, for instance, sedimentation, filtration of water. I can use a shamag. Again, very useful when it's cold. I can wrap my neck, I can cover my ears, I can cover my head. That's very useful. In cold weather, this is something which hardly weighs anything, but I carry it. It's a buff, and the advantage of this buff is this much is fleece, so it keeps my ears, neck, top of the head pretty warm. So again, I consider this as part of my shelter system. If I'm in an area with a lot of bugs, a lot of mosquitoes, this is the other thing which I have as, again, part of my shelter system. You could also consider it clothing, but yeah, I could put it over my head, and once I have the cap, it's away from my face. I can breathe pretty easily, and the mosquitoes and the bugs don't get into my ears, nose, mouth when I'm sleeping. Also, I can use this as a fishing net. Multi-purpose. Whatever you can multitask, try and do that in the wilderness. So that's pretty much my shelter. Now, like I said, once I've made shelter, I need to find fire. Now, you can rub sticks together to make fire. You can make bamboo fire plows. You can make primitive fires. But what I found is just make life a lot easier. Life in the wilderness is tough. It's time consuming. It's energy consuming. So what I would do is carry a ferrocerium rod. It's a very simple thing. It works forever. I've had this for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and I've used it extensively. And it's pretty simple. Just do that, and you have sparks. You have some tinder material which catch, and you have a fire pretty quickly. Instead of, it's good to learn friction fire, but I would carry a ferrocerium rod. If the tinder is very, very wet and it's very difficult to light, it's humid, there's a lot of moisture in the stuff that you're trying to light, I would carry something like a magnesium bar, where you can scrape off the magnesium. It's very, very hot, and once it catches a spark, it's almost impossible to extinguish. So carry a magnesium bar. It's also got a flint here, so scrape off some magnesium and use the flint to get a spark. You can start a fire with that. And the advantage of these, it works when wet. It's pretty difficult to lose. Why? Because I usually have it as part of this, which is around my neck, which is some essentials. This has got a ferrocerium rod. So this is not going away from my neck. And I'll show you this in a bit, what all is here. Also, the easiest way to light a fire is disposable lighters, even if they don't work. This works, this doesn't work, but for instance, this one has got a ferrocerium rod inside. So even if the fire is not coming on, you can gradually scrape it and get some of that powder out from the ferro rod, and then use this spark to catch the ferro rod to ignite. So carry and don't throw away a lighter which has stopped working, because it doesn't give you fire, but it will give you fire if you know how. Even these, you can take these out and you can light fires with this. This has got an electronic device inside, so carry a fire, disposable lighter, maybe even a matchbox. These I personally don't like because they get wet and they're much bulkier compared to the other things, but keep one in any case. And to make life easier, while you're going out, just pack some cotton and soak it in petroleum jelly, put it in a waterproof container like this, and this will take a spark very, very easily. And when it's soaked in some kind of accelerant like a petroleum jelly or a hand sanitizer or some kind of alcohol, deodorant, the fire will stay for much longer. Your burn time is much longer, giving you time to ignite your kindling. So keep some cotton balls soaked in petroleum jelly, actually. That seems to work the best. So you've got your fire, and then is water, which is very, very important. The majority of our body, I think 60, 65, 70% of our body is water. And if you don't hydrate yourself, you could be dead very, very quickly. In fact, the rule of 3 states that you could be dead in three days without water. In a desert, in a very hot, humid condition where the fluids is getting soaked out, you could be dead much quicker in a day. So you always need to have water. So what I would do is carry a filtration device. This is a life straw. You can put it into contaminated water and sip it straight out of here. And it'll clean out most of the nasties from the water. Similarly with the mini soya, you can put it directly into bad water. And the advantage of this one is it'll fit most regular bottles. So you can fill a bottle with contaminated water. Instead of a regular cap, use this as a cap, and you can drink straight out of that. So you could use either a life straw or a mini soya. I like both. This is smaller, so this would get into my survival kit. This might get into my regular pack, if at all. So these are 2 things as far as water filtration is concerned. I would also keep some potassium permanganate and a couple of crystals in a liter of water, and about half an hour it's good to drink. So again, this is no weight at all. You can carry that to purify, disinfect your water. Again, like I said, with the bandana, you can disinfect water. You need about 3 layers at least. Now, how do you store your water? I would carry a canteen. This is about a 600 ml canteen. I would prefer a liter canteen. But why I like this, again, it's multi-purpose, because I can take that out, and what I have is a nesting cup on which I can cook my food. I can boil my water in this, I can cook my food in this, put it right back in, and that's it. So in one water bottle, you've got, you're solving 2 issues. One is food, one is water. So you have a cooking container right in this nesting cup. And if you don't have a nesting cup in your water bottle, you could have another metal water bottle or a plastic water bottle. You could have that, in which case I would recommend carrying something like this. This is a little bulky from the look of it, but then a lot of the other stuff would go in when you're packing it. So all the stuff can go inside. You lit it up, put it in your bag, and when you need it, just empty the stuff out. And this you can use for cooking. This you can use for frying stuff if you want, roasting stuff if you want. So this is an important piece of equipment for cooking. But if I have the nesting cup, maybe I would drop this. I won't take this because there is a certain amount of bulk and volume in this. And when you're eating, if you don't want to get your fingers dirty, just carry a cutlery tool. It's got a spoon, it's got a fork, it's got a knife, it's got a can opener, it's got a bottle opener. So I've never used the bottle opener or the can opener, but yeah, the knife, spoon, and the fork, that's something I've used pretty often, every time I go out. And again, this is small, it gets into your pocket if you want. So you could use that. For water, coming back to water, I'll just carry a couple of other things. One is this, again, this is multi-purpose. This is a slingshot band. So if my slingshot, I'll show you the slingshot. If the slingshot band breaks, this is a replacement which I have. But alternatively, if I were to disinfect water through distillation, I could find 2 plastic bottles in trash and connect the 2 together, use this for condensation. So again, multi-purpose. I could use this, or I could use a slightly thicker tubing. So that was going back to water. But yeah, in food, you need something to cook, and I carry a slingshot. Again, this is small, lightweight, doesn't take any space at all, and I can use it to hunt. Easy enough to make in the woods, but if you got something, carry it. So this is always in my bag. Wherever there's a pool of water, chances are you'll find some fish. That's again food. So like I said, I can turn this into a fishing net. I can turn the top sheet into a fishing net. But I also have some fishing line which I carry. There's some fishing line, this one. And in this one, I've got lots of hooks. So there's lots of hooks in there. I've got fishing line. Weights are not a problem. Even if you don't carry hooks, you can make hooks, but this again doesn't take any weight at all. So you just carry that. So you got shelter, you got fire, you got water, and you got food. Next comes signaling. You see people, you want to signal to them, you want to get rescued. So there are various ways of signaling. One is, of course, a whistle. You can shout, but you can't shout loud enough, and your throat will get hoarse, and shouting is not a good idea. Whistle is certainly better than shouting. Again, this is a multi-purpose whistle. There's a compass here, there's a whistle here, there's a magnifying glass here, there's a temperature gauge here, small, multitask. So a whistle is something that you should always carry. again, that's part of the thing that hangs around my neck, and I'll show you that. The other thing is a signaling mirror. This is about the best signaling device. This can be seen for miles, and if you know how to use it, this is almost a sure shot way of attracting attention. And in camp, you can use it as a mirror. Well, I never used it, but yeah, you can use it as a mirror while in camp. So you got a signaling mirror, you got a whistle, and you can use a torch, a small torch. Yeah, so something like that. Again, don't just point it. Make some kind of and the various signaling methods. It needs to look that it doesn't belong in nature. So wherever the light source is coming from, for the person who's looking at it, he needs to be inquisitive and curious that that doesn't quite look right. You would have seen chem lights, the ones that you break, and it gives you light for some for about 2-3 hours, some overnight. But I prefer this because a chem light you can use only once. But this one, I can use forever as long as I keep changing the batteries. Now, what this has is there's got a button here, and it's got a torch again, which I can use around camp. Not very powerful for signaling, but yeah, I can use that. And this works like a chem light, so I can signal with this. So, and it's got a strobe, so it keeps pulsating. So instead of a chem light, I would use this. This is hardly costs anything at all. I picked it up about a couple of years ago. So I would keep this. Another torch which I always have, this is more for use in camp, while I'm in camp at night. This goes around my head. And it leaves my hands free to do all the stuff. And again, this has got 3 or 4 modes in which to operate it. So that again is part of my kit. So that's signaling. So you've hopefully seen people, but unfortunately they've not been able to see you. So therefore you need to navigate your way out, self-navigate to safety, which is where the knowledge of the terrain, compasses, how to go, where to go, and not get further lost, that comes in handy. So carry a compass. There are lots of different kinds of compasses. Essentially a lensatic compass or a map reading compass, orientating compass. So I don't really care which one you use, as long as you have one which you can make out gradients and the degrees and stuff like that. So this one, for instance, you can hang it around your neck with the lanyard. This would open up. It's got a signaling mirror. It's got a lot of good stuff. So you can use this, or you can use a similar one, something like this, which has got you look through that and you know your heading and you know your bearing of the direction that you're headed. You could use something like this. You could use a prismatic compass like this. I don't care what you use, as long as it does the job. I would not use a button compass. As you can see, I've got a button compass right here. This will essentially tell you which direction is northeast, west, south. It's not going to point you in exactly the right direction. So if you're wanting to go to 87.3 degrees, no, it's not going to do that. It's going to just tell you that north is somewhere out there, south is somewhere out there, so on and so forth. It'll just tell you roughly directions, but these are the ones which will point you in the right direction. The other thing which I have as part of navigation is pacing beads. It's very easy to get lost, and unless you know how far you've gone, and if you know that it's going to be 1.5 kilometers and you have walked for 2 kilometers, if you don't have a pacing bead and you're not pacing yourself, it's possible to just go on and get further lost. So with a pacing bead, you know how far you've gone and when to start getting worried again, that you might have veered off course. So pacing beads is something else that is important as far as navigation is concerned. Let me quickly show you this thing, which is, like I said, is around my neck. One is fire. I've got a ferrocerium rod. I've got a whistle, I've got pacing beads, and I've got a carabiner. What it also has is a button compass, but like I said, that not really useful, but at least you won't be heading south when you want to head north. So to that extent, it is useful. Now to come to cutting tools. One of the most difficult things to improvise out in the wilderness is a knife. So you should always, always, always carry a knife and take care of it, because a knifeless person is a lifeless person, as they say in the wild. So always carry a knife. I've got a bunch of them. This is something I've used for some time. This is a Muela, and like you can see, it's been banged up pretty good. And I've used this, a nice, heavy, good feel to it, and I've got some extra cord in here. So that's one. Choice of knife is up to you, but about an 8-inch blade. Full tang is preferable, is good. Now this is another knife I picked up about 6-8 months ago, and I like this knife. It's cold steel. It's not very heavy, but it's got a nice feel to it. And the other advantage of this particular knife is it's hollow. So I can put a branch and turn it into a spear quite easily without having to lash it into the branch. I can just get a branch, shove it in here, and I have myself a spear or a javelin, which becomes an improvised weapon. The other thing in this knife, it's got a ferrocerium rod, so with which I can start fires. So I kind of like this knife. The other knife which I picked up pretty recently, and I have not taken it out into the wilderness, is this. It is actually a bayonet, and that's the knife. It's heavy. It's got a very nice feel to it. Would I carry this or would I carry one of those? It really depends, because they'll pretty much do the same stuff. This is a good knife. It's got a good feel to it. It's got a pretty decent handle, and what I also like about this particular knife, it's got a sharpening stone out here, so I don't need to carry an extra sharpening stone. And it's got a pocket in which I've got my handy dandy Swiss tool. And the Swiss tool I use every day virtually, in something or the other, working at home. So this is another knife. So definitely have a knife, because without a knife, you're in big trouble. So a knife, like I said, is one of the most difficult things to improvise out in the woods. So keep a knife. Now when you're making shelter, when you're cutting your firewood, what you'll need to do is cut those logs. If they're large logs and you can't lug it back to camp or whatever, so you need to break it up into smaller pieces. That's when an axe comes in handy. Now this axe is not something that I would usually carry in one of these survival kits. I would carry a hatchet, which is much smaller, much lighter, takes far less space, and it does pretty much the same job. Now this is a hatchet which I've used extensively, and I would tend to carry something like this instead of something like this, which is bigger, heavier, much heavier actually. It's about almost 2 kilos actually. So I don't want to carry this, but that's an option that's available to you. I would much rather carry a hatchet, which is smaller. But if you expect big logs, I might carry an axe head. And just improvise and handle out in the woods. So don't carry one with the handle. This is very light. You can make a handle out of it, and you have yourself an axe for heavier duty jobs. But what I've found is it's very, very easy to carry a folding saw. Again, extremely light, and this goes through 6-inch logs in about 30 seconds. You can just use that instead of going whack, whack, whack with a hatchet. I found this to be much, much, much easier to cut logs with, whether it's for shelter, whether it's for fire, or making a tripod for something. It's very, very easy. So find yourself a folding saw. And a bigger is obviously easier. I also have a smaller one, which I don't usually carry. After I've got the big one, I don't carry the small one. But yes, folding saw is better than a hatchet, certainly. This is a favorite among a lot of survivalist campers, which is a commando saw, wire saw. Again, this does the job pretty well. But what I have found, and it's happened to me in the past, these have a life. These tend to snap. So don't depend on this exclusively. Carry a hatchet, carry a folding saw, carry a knife, but also carry this, because small jobs you can accomplish with this pretty easily. Some tools that I carry: Ziploc bags, in case things get wet or I need to isolate some things from other things in the bag, so I can put them in a Ziploc bag. I can use these to pasteurize water, I can use these to store water. So these are important, and they don't weigh anything. I also carry a plastic sheet just in case I need to solar distill water. At a pinch, I can use this as a mattress. So yeah, I have a plastic sheet. I have some garbage bags. Always carry your stuff out. Don't leave garbage out there. So please carry garbage bags. And again, the garbage bag can be turned into a poncho, for instance. You can connect two of them together and turn it into a tent. So that's possible. So always carry some cordage. Like knives, cords are very difficult to make in the wilderness. They take forever, not very easy, and not very tough if you don't know how. So carry that. One luxury that I carry is toilet paper. I can use leaves, dry grass, much better. I also have kitchen foil, tin foil. Variety of uses. You can use it at a pinch to cook your food on, for instance. You can use it as a fire protector. You can use it as a mattress. You can wrap it around yourself like a space blanket. Lots of uses for kitchen foil. So I've got some carabiners to hang stuff from inside the tent. My light, for instance. I haven't shown you this. This is something that I can hang inside my tent. Pretty useful. I would have preferred it collapsible, but even this is good. And I would have preferred it slightly lighter. So anyway, that works. And I can use carabiners to hang food from trees when I'm going to sleep at night. I don't want my food taken away by wild animals in the area. So that's something that goes into these bags. I've got some calamine lotion just in case. I've got a hand sanitizer. Hygiene is important. So I've got a hand sanitizer. And what I have is a snake bite kit. Lots of snakes in and around India. So it's got a snake bite kit, it's got a tourniquet, it's got an antiseptic cream, it's got a little scalpel. And I've got a couple of dry bags actually. Again, to be used like a Ziploc bag. Yeah, so that is it. And that's the kind of stuff that would get into your survival kit, your self-reliance kit, your bug-out kit, whatever term you might need to use. But this is the stuff that will make you a happier camper. And not all of this stuff would go in. For instance, I would carry one knife, not 5 knives. I would carry one hatchet, not an axe and a hatchet and an axe head. One compass, not so many. This is just to show you alternatives. But yeah, most of this stuff would get into one of these 2 bags. And keep it small. A gram becomes a kilo becomes a ton. When you're out there frustrated, lost, trying to find your way out in a survival situation, in a self-reliant situation. So keep it small. That's the kind of stuff that you would need to carry to make your life much more, much happier, much easier. So that's a survival kit that I would carry. But this is not just for the outdoors, not just for adventurers, not just for survivalists, not just for the time when you head out into the hills for a holiday. Much of this can also be useful in an unfortunate circumstance that you might be faced with in daily life, for instance. And for instance, you're going out on a holiday with your folks, with your family, and you are hit with a landslide, you're hit with an earthquake, and suddenly it becomes a survival situation. If you have all this, your life will become so much easier, and you won't need to depend on outside resources for help. Another thing, a lot of people ask me, why do I need all this if I want to learn primitive skills? Now, primitive skills are what skills were used by our ancient ancestors. Life has changed in the last 10,000 years, and one thing that people fail to realize is even our primitive ancestors, even if they were living what we term a primitive lifestyle, they had tools and equipment with them. In the Bronze Age, they made tools with bronze. In the Iron Age, they made tools with iron. In the Stone Age, they made tools with stone. Today, in the modern world, we have tools like these. Do not necessarily believe that learning primitive skills is about being naked in the wild. Use whatever tools are available to you in the modern world, but don't be entirely dependent on them. Learn alternative methods, learn how to use the tools. Remember that the tools are just tools. You have to know the skills. Just because you have a tool doesn't mean that you have mastered the skill. So you need to master the skill and use the tool as just that, as a tool. And then your life will be so much easier. And don't believe that you need to go back 10,000 years to live a primitive lifestyle. A primitive lifestyle is living off the land with whatever tools are available to you. And if you can multitask the tools, if you know how to use the tools, you won't be in a survival situation. You'll be in a self-reliant situation, much, much, much happier. So that's pretty much it. And I'll see you soon. And I hope I've been able to give you some indications of the stuff that needs to be in your bag. It will change depending on the terrain you go to, depending on the weather that you're going to be expecting in that area. But yes, this is pretty much the kind of thing that you would need to carry to address the 8 essentials of wilderness survival. Cheers.